Mirella Acebo. I enjoyed this conversation so much. Her motherhood. Let's just start there. Motherhood. She wrote a book, a fascinating book, just based on mothers. SOS for the MOM, a children's mom guide to managing emotions. Fascinating story. She lives in California. Her mother came over from Mexico, sixth grade education, worked in a ranch, worked hard, met a man, had Marilla. Marilla never met her father. It was just the two of them. Marilla had this strong woman who worked all the time and provided, and they just got by, but she was so happy. And there's some things that end up happening with her mother tragically, unfortunately, but she went on to, she has great two children and a husband. And she revisits the church, a strong spiritual background. Each chapter in the book, she goes through a different emotion and state of mind, and she attaches a mother, in this case, a biblical mother, to each chapter and to each emotion. It's a fascinating take on motherhood. As a father, as a man, hard to relate. I do my best. I do ask her at one point, what can we do to relate? And it's just a great conversation. It's an honest discussion, and she's so genuine and she's so honest about her process, about why she did it and where she is now. And I just really enjoyed this conversation with Morella. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pins. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic, I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business that lasted over 25 years? Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family, in their passion, in their careers, and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pins Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration. So very excited to talk to you, Mirella Acebo. Thank you
Correct.
so much. I appreciate it. What role does and should a mother play in the family unit?
The mother is the anchor. She lays the foundation for the family. She sets the tone. She's the matriarch. She's a leader. She's strong in ways that she doesn't know, because motherhood calls for a perseverance and a strength that we don't know we have until we become mothers. And now there's no way out. We can't reverse the clock. We got to show up. This role requires that we show up.
Yeah, and there's no real way a father, a male, can truly understand, because birth is from the mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a very intimate experience. It's an emotional experience.
Mm.
There's a spiritual experience. It's deep. From the time that life is being created and growing in our womb, there's a nurturing, a natural nurturing that starts to happen. And we start to really care really deeply. It's like these pathways suddenly awaken that weren't there before.
Mm.
There's a
Mhm.
level of love that's there. Not for everybody, not everybody's
Right.
experience is the same. But I would say, generally speaking, yeah, that attachment, at least it should be there. That would be a healthy way to experience a pregnancy and the birthing of a child.
You have a fascinating backstory. Your mother came. She worked in a farm in Mexico. She came to the U.S. She met a man. She had you. You were. She was a single mother. She kept working, and you were latchkey, and and this brought up your strong relationship with your mother.
Absolutely. Yeah. I learned a lot from her example. She came here in her early 20s from Mexico, not knowing anybody. She started from scratch. She was
Mm,
working low end jobs, factory jobs, as a nanny, as a housekeeper. She had a sixth grade education from Mexico, so she didn't speak the English language. And she came here, met somebody, had me, as you said, and chose to be a mom, to be the
mm.
best mom that she could be with the lack of education or knowledge or yeah, she found it within her to be the best mom that she could be.
But it was that bond with you, Morella, that kept everything strong. You never met your father. It was just
Right.
you two. You'd come home and she wasn't there, and you just got this was you thought this was normal. You met your friends. They did, it was different experiences, but you still
Yeah.
learned to work hard, and you learned and understood that bond.
Mhm. Yeah, I started taking care of myself at around 10 years old. About I was in 5th grade. We had just moved to Burbank, and I remember I would be responsible for waking myself up because my mom would be
Mm,
gone. She'd be out of the house by 5:30 in the morning, so I would get up, make my lunch, make my breakfast, walk myself to school, do
mm,
school all day, and then come home to an empty house, because mom was working late too. She was working long hours, trying to get in the overtime to make that extra money that we needed to survive and pay the rent and pay the groceries, all that stuff. And it's what I knew. It was normal. I spent a lot of time alone, um, and it was okay. It was okay. I found ways to fill the time, and I matured very quickly. I was responsible for more things than I think most of my peers,
hmm.
and it was normal to me.
Yeah, you expressed like this happiness. It's one story you told how there was like extra almost $20 for that week, so you're able to do certain things, and you just budgeted that way, and this is the
Yeah.
way life worked.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, my mom,
Um,
with pencil and paper, she would write out the budget for the week. She would be paid paycheck by paycheck.
right.
And so she taught me very early on, you got to pay your bills, you got to pay the rent, you got to pay the utilities, and we will make do with whatever is left over. And
Mhm.
I will never forget that image of her in the kitchen writing her numbers out, all of that, and she'd say, "Yeah, we have $20 to go buy groceries this week." And that was a good thing. And it was a good
Right.
thing. So she really set the tone. She presented things in a way that made anything possible. We could stretch
Mhm.
$20. Now, granted, this was in the 80s, so $20 went a lot
Mm,
further than it
mhm.
does today. So
Yeah.
$20, if you're buying, the healthy stuff, and she liked to cook, so she cooked. Uh, much. I mean, we rarely went out, maybe once a week on a Sunday. Perhaps we would go out to lunch. So we made it work. It's not like we went without, like I wasn't going hungry, right? So she just taught me, yeah, you work hard, you're going to earn a living, and we're going to get creative in how we're going to make our money stretch. And we'll be okay. Even if we have to shop at secondhand stores or,
Mm.
we do what we have to do.
It's wonderful, absolutely wonderful. You end up marrying a man who's also an only child and having children, and
Yeah.
uh, and of course, something your mother starts to get sick, and unfortunately, the nurses praise her how happy she is and how well she is, and unfortunately, she passes your kids. I believe are about 9 months and 2 years old, and there's
Hmm.
a void there, Marilla.
Hmm. There absolutely was a void. My mom and I were very, very close. And at the end of her life, I became her caretaker.
Mm.
And that is an extremely difficult role. to take on. And not just logistically and physically, but really emotionally, to see the matriarch of the family, to see my mom, who had cared for me so well, who had sacrificed so much, who gave her life really to raise me because she had decided she was not going to remarry, that she really was going to focus on the two of us and raising me and protecting me the best way that she could. And so she had struggled with health issues all of her life. So that was
Mm,
always a topic of conversation, that she would prepare me for what if she ends up passing out? What if she ends up, having some kind of seizure? She was a diabetic, so what happens? And so I was raised really early on to at least entertain that something might go wrong, but not to be afraid. Have a plan of
mm,
action. If this were to happen, this is how we're going to take care of ourselves. So
mm.
that really early on was the programming for me. Is we had conversations about really mature things. Um, Things that could happen that were potential hazards. Anyways, um, as she's nearing her end of life, she was diagnosed with cancer. Then she went into remission. The cancer returned. Then she was diagnosed with Parkinson's. So we've got the
Mm.
Parkinson's, the diabetes, cancer, and then a handful of other things. She had had surgeries and such. As an only child, that's a big weight to carry. And again, I'm speaking emotionally
Right.
because you care so much. I cared so much as an only child, and I wanted to give back in the ways that she had given to me. And in some ways, I felt like it just wasn't enough. Wasn't enough. And yeah, I just carried so much emotion. It was very overwhelming, very hard to feel like you've given so much, and there's nothing I can do to reverse the illness. There's nothing I can do to give her more days on earth. And you really just become, it's a very defeating thing to watch your parent die and know that that's coming.
You feel helpless, and it's a
Yeah.
dramatic role reversal. But
Yeah.
all through your life, towards the end, your spirituality was your backbone of the foundation. Is that fair to say?
Yes. 100%. Mhm. My mom was a strong woman of faith. I was raised in the church, so we went to church every Sunday, and I saw her walk the walk. She was really strong in her faith, a prayer warrior, and she really role modeled Christian principles for me. And I saw that inner strength in her. That's what I witnessed growing
Mm,
up, and especially in those final years when she was physically deteriorating and wasting away, yet I saw this inner strength in her
mm, mm,
that still was undeniable, that
mm.
spoke volumes to me. How could someone remain so strong in their faith given their condition? Yeah, that got my attention.
Certainly did. And through this, you write a book, SOS for the MOM, Christian Mom's Guide to Managing Emotions. They got 10 chapters. Each chapter is dedicated to emotional state of mind. You attach a biblical mother to each chapter, to each example. Where's the inspiration for this, Marilla?
hmm The inspiration came from first my own need for support.
Mm,
My mom passed away when my kids were young. My son was 9 months. My daughter was 2 years old, and I was hoping to have my mom there to help me raise
mm,
my
mm,
family, to help me be a role model to my children, and to be of support and encouragement to me. And she was gone. And so, as a new mom, I was already flooded with emotions. I was already just so weighed down being a caretaker and feeling guilty and just sad and overwhelmed, all of that. And then on top of that, I've got a young family that I'm raising, and so I needed somebody to pour into me. And so I joined small groups at church, and I was with other moms, with like-minded moms, and that was a huge, huge support that I needed. It filled a void. And so when I think about, well, fast forward 20 years, my kids are now adults, they're grown. And so I think back to myself, what would have helped me back in that season? And people were there to help me for sure. They were there to encourage me and to give me strength, but people can only do so much. And there was a void there, and it needed to be filled. And I was at a place of just needing to reconnect and rediscover my faith.
Mm.
And then that's where I just immersed myself back into church and my relationship with God. And in doing all of that, I wanted to write a book to encourage my younger self, to
Mm.
acknowledge that we all have emotions. Moms definitely have a lot of emotions. And I wanted to talk about these things like mom guilt and this chronic worry that we experience as moms, regardless of the age of our children. We worry a lot when they're young. We still worry when they're older. And as adults, we worry. We're overwhelmed. We're constantly thinking. We're just on autopilot almost, this
Mm.
inner dialogue constantly going. And so I wanted to be able to address the realness of that. We can be real with our emotions, but how do we keep from our emotions controlling us and getting the best of us? So we're
Mm.
not then driven by our emotions and how we respond. And so now I started to explore more about that. Well, how do we do that? Well, who are my examples? Who are
Mm.
some of my examples? And I decided to go back to scripture and look at those early stories that I was taught growing up, but now from a mother's point of view. And I wanted to focus on the mothers and their stories in scripture. And, a lot of these women, we don't know a lot about them. They're mentioned by name and they're
Yeah.
attached to a story.
Mm.
And what we tend to study is the story, which we absolutely should, because the Bible is not about women and their emotions. But what I wanted to do is go back and go, as a mother, what would it feel like for Moses' mom, for example, right? There's a story of Jochebed. Jochebed has she's a slave. She's a slave girl, and she has a baby, and he's 3 months old, and this is Moses. And in order to save his life, she puts him in the river. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, as a mother, was she
Mm.
worried? Was she worried about his safety? Was she worried about his survival? Was she worried that, I don't know, something would happen to her, something would happen to the baby? Did she worry for the rest of his life? Because
Mm.
she was then adopted into Pharaoh's family, raised there. And so I just started getting really curious about these moms and seeing what they had to go through. And that was an inspiration to me, and it was a way for me to see, look, we can look at these stories and see what it took. That there's inspiration there. That these women were strong. We're not alone. The things
Mm.
that we're going through, our details, the circumstances look different, but motherhood isn't easy. And so that's what I decided to do, is go back and step into the shoes of these women and tell the story from their point of view and from an emotional point of view. Now,
Mm.
part of the reason for doing that also is I'm an actor. So I've been an actor in LA for about 16 years now. And there's a lot of training that's just inherently in me. And so as an actor, I started to, early on in your training, you get a script, you break down the script, you understand the character, you get really curious about the character, what's driving them, what's motivating them, what's the underlying emotion, what's the scene about, all of that. So it's like a character study. You're breaking down the character. And that's very much part of the creating of this book, is
Mm.
taking the ability to be able to break down a character and they really get curious about them. And so that's what I wanted to do with this book is bring a humanity to the mothers and to these stories and to tell the stories in a very conversational way, in a way
Mm.
that's relevant to us today. So breathe life basically into the women and into their stories and to serve as inspiration for us.
You certainly shine a unique light. Hagar was abandoned by Abraham. I don't know how else to say it. And Noah's wife, we're not even told what her name is, but you could see how strong she could be. But it's amazing the kind of light you bring to the I was going to say characters, but these people.
Mhm. Right. And I'm using those words interchangeably. When I say
I see.
characters, I
Yeah,
absolutely mean,
yeah.
yes,
You know what
real
I mean?
women.
Yeah. Yes, I don't mean to pretend that they're fictional. I just mean,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I'm glad you think so.
And
I
when
thought
you
so.
yeah, it's a unique perspective. I
Uh-huh.
enjoy perspective so much. And the birth again of this, you came back to your church. You kind of revisited scripture, and your theme is on your mother, of course, and just motherhood. And you bring these characters to life like this. I mean, it's how long did it take to write? How long did it take to actually come up with the idea? I'm so interested in the blank page, Marilla. What do you do with it?
Mm. Mhm. It really was a spiritual download. That's the best way
Mm,
I can describe it. I've had this idea in my mind, SOS for the MOM. I know I was made to encourage other women, other
oh,
moms. As I said, part of my story is how can I help moms in the way that I felt like I wanted to be supported, and so here I am wanting to do that. And so I've had this idea sort of just kind of rattling in my mind for about a year now, and it
mm,
wasn't until last May where I just decided it's either now or it's gonna be a long time for now from now.
mm,
No more
mm.
excuses. I'm gonna really commit to doing this. And so it was last May where I decided I was going to write every day, over the course of the summer. So I wrote this book in 4 months. I had given
Wow.
myself a deadline. I wanted it to be September, but I wrote it and I finished it in October. And it was through a brainstorming session with a friend, and I was talking about, yeah, this is my idea. And so as I was bouncing off ideas, he affirmed, ooh, that's a good one. That one's
Mm,
interesting. I went, oh,
mm,
okay. Because sometimes, what you think somebody might be interested, maybe it's just interesting to me. I don't know.
mm,
But it's
mm,
when you're bouncing off ideas with somebody else and just that sort of birth the idea together. And so then I thought, oh, I wonder if that's a thing. Okay, so you like the idea of attaching a biblical mother to these emotions. Well, let me dig let me dig into that a little bit. And let me see.
mm,
I didn't want to make things up. I wanted it to be grounded in truth and biblical
mm,
stories. But which moms could I attach the emotions to make a bigger point? To to I wanted them to be a good match. And then
mm,
I found as I was brainstorming and mapping out, okay, what are the emotions that I have felt or that moms generally feel? And so I started mapping that out, and then I started thinking, going really through the Bible. I thought, okay, well, let's start with Eve. Oh, Eve was an obvious one. That's mom
mm,
guilt. She's got guilt written all over her,
mm,
all over her. And I thought, oh, well, that's a natural fit. Okay, well, let's move on. Let's move on to Noah's wife. Okay, well, the story there is that God asked them to build this ark because he's going to destroy the world. I thought, well, that sounds really overwhelming. First of all, they're living in a hostile world, and now they're being asked to build this ark. It had never rained, right? The ark is for anybody who wants to go in it, and we know only their family goes in it. So I was thinking, that just seems like a natural emotion. She was overwhelmed. Overwhelmed with the assignment? Was she overwhelmed
Mm,
with raising children in this world? Was she overwhelmed being on the ark? They were as I started doing a little more digging, I'm learning the ark wasn't just 40 days. The ark life was a year. They spent a
mm,
year in an ark. Well, that sounds really overwhelming to me. So I started just exploring the different emotions and with the different stories that I was reading and so on and so forth. I started digging a little bit more, and it just was a natural fit as I
mm.
was starting to pair the mothers and focusing on a certain emotion that I believe they felt. So I talk about control. That's a very common emotion. If you call it an emotion, it's a way of being. But
Mm.
controlling, I talk about Sarah going ahead of God's plan and having a child, and she always gets a bad rap. I sort of feel bad for her. Uh, I don't know that she. I'm sorry. I meant patience with her. Sarah, the lesson that came from her was patience. Patience
Yeah.
versus impatience. Control was Rebecca. Rebecca with her two sons. And so I had a lot of fun revisiting those stories and putting myself in their shoes.
Yeah, you bring out the point of Eve. I mean, can you imagine one of your sons killing the other?
Yeah.
And what that meant to her. You mentioned once that you brain dumped. I know it as a mind map where you just kind of map everything out. And was it almost like a storyboard where you kind of
Hmm.
brought these characters in? And so you
Yeah.
put it up on the wall with your friend, and then you just translate it all. So you had some kind of map that you started with, and then you just pen to paper. Did you write actually pen to paper? Did you type?
Pen to paper.
Mm,
Always pen to
yeah,
paper. I do
yeah.
not type. I don't like using the computer for such things. And if you look at, I know I have it somewhere here, but if you look at my brain map, it's chicken scratch. Only I can
Mm,
understand it,
right.
but only I needed to understand it. It got my ideas out, and I started connecting things and circling things and starring things, and it just became so clear to me. Yeah, that was the framework. That was the outline. And now I just had to go right.
You mentioned that you're an actor. I watched some of your, I don't know if they're audition videos on YouTube. They're excellent. They're amusing, and the one
Oh,
where
thanks.
you actually took the pot brownies and you were going to get an interview, and it's very good. It's just something I just cannot do. It's wonderful how you could channel that, but you also bring up the point of, you've been in so many commercials, and you'd have to shoot them over and over again with different lenses, and you make the comparison of the different lenses to the book, where you could see the viewpoint from different areas, from different perspectives to each of these characters.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, in terms of the lenses, one of the things that is coming to mind right now, I don't know if this is what you meant, but when we're shooting something, there are literally different lenses. So we're
Right.
doing a wide shot, which is just that. You're getting a big picture. There's a medium shot, and then there's the close up. And each one is meant to impact you differently. One is you're just glancing at the full picture, and then as you start going into your close up, that's where the emotion is seen and
Mm,
felt from the audience. And so that's one of the things that just naturally translate. That's one of the lessons, really, a life lesson for me. And what I did in this book using those three lenses is that I give an overview of the story, whether it's my story, whether it's a Bible story. That's the wide shot. Then when I go a little bit more intimate, the medium shot. And then the close up shot is okay, this is you and me. How is
hmm.
this impacting you? What are you getting from this? What's the inspiration, if any? How are you
Hmm.
encouraged? What needs to change? Can you relate to this? And so that's sort of how I use the three lens perspective. And same with life too. Same with
Mm.
life. We can get stuck in such a close up view of something in our life, a trial, a challenge, a struggle, and we're so fixated on looking at this thing in one way. And we can easily fall victim to whatever it is that we're experiencing, then I just remind myself, and this is so encouraging to me, okay, let's zoom out a little bit. What's the bigger story? How does this piece, this slice, this thing that I'm going through fit into the bigger picture? If I just zoom out and I get some altitude on this, what else is true?
Mm.
Because this thing that I'm going through right now, yeah, it seems really hard. But what else is true? There's also
Hmm.
goodness. There's also things that we can be grateful for. There's also opportunities for growth and all of that. And that's what life takes. We have to grow as we go in all seasons and everything that we're going through. Yeah.
I remember attending a festival in college or shortly thereafter, and there was this artist who had half of an arm and the other arm wasn't there, and he was painting to canvas, big canvas by probably 6 by 6 with his feet. So the brush he would dip in and he would paint. And he had loud, like 60s music on, like, the Doors and the Beatles and Led Zeppelin. And he was painting with his feet. And we're all gathered around and we're saying, this is incredible. But his painting, it doesn't look like anything. I said, well, he's not that good because we can't understand what's happening. And, he's kind of nodding his head and this music's going on for like 20 minutes. We're engaged and he's finally done. And he kind of wheels around. And he says, what do you think, everybody? And we're all like, you would kind of clap. And he goes, you sometimes you got to look at perspective. And then he proceeds to get his feet and he gets this thing that he painted and he turns it upside down and it's perfectly John Lennon and Janis Joplin and it
Whoa.
was them painted and he just painted them upside down just for us
Whoa.
to say that's your perspective. You have to look at things sometimes differently.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And the fact that you got to see it in real life,
Yeah,
that stays with you. That has
it really does.
impact. What a
It
good
certainly
lesson.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, how that can be. You know, Quentin Tarantino, the great director, producer, writer, when he one of his famous quotes is that he makes movies for himself. So he makes these movies and he wants to watch them, and anybody else can come in and watch if they want. When you're writing the book, do you have the reader in mind, or are you
Mhm.
really writing it for therapy, or is it a little bit of both?
Mm. I have one person in mind. I really narrow it down, and I think of the one person who I thought of for that chapter. So whether it's somebody that I've worked with before, whether it's a client, whether it's a friend, whether if just a situation that was shared with me, somebody who is really suffering, for example, in a season of motherhood, their child was suffering, and by default, I mean, we suffer. We're suffering all the time. Anytime our child is in pain or anything that's happening against them, um, it's a pain point for us too. It's by osmosis, and so I thought of the different people, the different people, like I said, to each chapter. So I really
Hmm.
wanted to personalize it and speak to that one person, trusting that what I was saying in that chapter to that one person was also for a bigger audience. I wanted to get that personal.
Did you acknowledge them in the acknowledgments? Do you make it known?
Oh, no, no. That was just, it served as my inspiration.
I see. Did you send them the
Yeah.
book?
No.
Hmm.
No.
What do you want
Uh,
people to take away from after reading?
I want people, specifically moms. I mean, men can read this too. I've been told,
Mm,
I need to get my husband to read this because it'll help him understand what I go through, right? The emotional weight that we carry. And so I would love for dads to read it, but specifically about moms. I want them to know that their emotions are okay.
mm.
Feeling emotions are okay, not to demonize them. We want to normalize our emotions, and they are a gift. And motherhood is going to bring out the best parts in us.
Mm.
But it also, if I'm honest, it brings out the worst parts in us. And so I want moms to feel like they can they can experience the emotion, acknowledge the emotion, but then also know that they can overrule the emotion, that they don't have to be controlled by their emotions. They don't have to be stuck in the rage, right? Mom rage is a real thing. And patience. I still experience it, and my kids are grown. The impatience, like just that, you just feel that rising, bubbling up
Mm,
of impatience, or I want to, react, or I want to lash out, or I want to control a situation because I want the outcome that I want,
mm.
um, and the anger, the overwhelm, all of those things. And I want them to be encouraged. I want to give them an opportunity to set their story aside and look to a different story that can give them inspiration. So that's what I hope for
Uh,
them.
Now, when you're mentioning emotions a lot,
Mhm.
is it the battle between the heart and the mind?
The battle between the heart and the mind. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Emotions, more
Yeah.
emotions are more heart and mind is more logic. I
Yeah.
bit over just a kind of wide picture.
Yeah. It's that internal struggle. It's not always a struggle. A lot
It
of
could be
times it is, though.
complementary. It could be
Yeah,
competitive. Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
Brother, what can fathers do to be better, to help mothers, to help understand, to be better? What can
Hmm.
fathers do?
I think that's a very sweet question. It's a very caring question because fathers can be of support. There are things fathers can do. Be of support, be a safe person, um, be a good listener. Men may not necessarily relate to the woman's battle. And I say battle because I really feel like that, you know, it is a battle that we face sometimes. This battle with our own nature, this battle with these emotions that can easily drive us and control us. And so I think for the man, for the dad, is to ask questions, be a safe person to talk to, and try to understand as much as he can. Have a
Compassion,
dialogue. Passion, yeah.
compassion.
Compassion, yeah. Yeah, that's a good one.
My parents got divorced when I was younger, 11 or 12. I went to live with my mother. I have a sister. Always knew I was going to have daughters. I just knew it, Morella. I just knew it. And all my life. And I have two beautiful daughters. And it's just, the world is so different for them. And your book highlights that. And I strive to be better and more understanding and compassionate. And
Mhm.
to when I hear of injustice against women, against these kinds of things, it obviously hurts me more being a father of daughters. But I ask these questions openly, only to learn, and hopefully others can as well.
Mhm. Yeah. I like that you shared that with me because 'cause you're right, yeah, being a father, you have a different perspective now.
Uh,
Yeah. Yeah, and your
Very
heart has
different.
probably opened up even more. So you're probably more, I don't know, I don't wanna speak for you, but did you find that after becoming a father, your emotional tank just opened up? Those pathways opened up? You started to feel more deeply because now you have something to you care more deeply. There's more to care about, right? You got more
Yeah, more than
sensitive?
ever.
More than
More
ever.
sensitive, more than ever, more than ever. And I don't know what kind of father I would be. You have a son and a daughter. I don't know how kind of
Mhm.
father I would be to a son, because I have nephews and I have less patience for them. You're a
Mhm.
male. Come on, but with
Mhm.
with a female, it's like, okay, all right, I see what's happening. I coach them both in soccer, for example. And you have to be, as a coach, as a father, with of girls, of young girls, you have to just be a little more patient. And sometimes a girl will fall and she'll look around to see if anybody's gonna to what her response should be, and you say, oh, come on, get right up. It's just like life. You fall down, you get back up, and they get back up and they keep running. And you just have to just
Yeah.
treat them just a little bit. It's not I don't want to say different, but it's just a little bit more compassion, a little more patience, and it works out. And it just works.
Mm.
It just works out.
Mhm. Yeah. I love that. That as a father, you're making those observations. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
They're
and sometimes the girls would not put their hair in ponytails. I tell the parents, put them in ponytails. So I'd call timeout, and I'd go out into the middle of the field, and I'd bring extra ties, and I'd get the girls in because keeps on pulling her hair. So I would tie a ponytail on a 7-year-old and go back to the side. And I love it. I love it. And the parents are like, oh, yeah. But it's like, okay, let's try to now everybody spread out a little bit, and let's try to point to where the
Yes.
goal is and go that way. So my point is, like, your kind of book, I don't, while it's geared towards mothers, I don't want males to not to shut that kind of thing out. I think it's important to get those
Mm.
perspectives. Is my
Yeah.
point.
I am so glad that you're saying that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I wondered. I did not write it with men in mind, but
Right.
like I said, as I talk to people, they give me feedback. Um, they tell me you have captured my emotions so
Mm.
well, and these are things I wouldn't have been able to articulate. And I hope I hope my husband reads it, that kind of thing. And so that to me is a bonus. It really is. If I've been able to, explain something in a way that's can be digested easily, where the reader can have some compassion, like, great, great. If I've opened them up to something new, something different, something to be curious about,
Mm.
I think that's a good thing
Yeah.
to learn.
As a You got to
Yeah,
constantly learn. If you're not growing, you're dying. I mean, I know
yeah.
it
I
sounds trite,
I
but
agree. I'm with you.
as I get older, I have more questions than I have answers. So
Mm.
I started a part of the main reason why I have this podcast, and I talk to fascinating people like yourself. When I started my business in the 90s, I was working far too much, Marilla. I was working 14-hour days. I was not taking care of myself. Pizza and soda, and I got myself up to 340 pounds. And my oldest daughter was just born, and I went and got a checkup, and the doctor says to me, if you don't lose this weight, you're not going to see her graduate. And by the way, she graduated last year in Cal State, right near you.
Oh,
And
great.
so I spent the next year and a half losing 130
Mhm.
pounds. The
Mm.
birth of my child, I brought myself here. I'm going to take myself out. I'm not just for myself anymore. I'm for this new person that's the center of my
Yes.
life, and
Uh,
everything has to change. So I spent the next year and a half losing 130 pounds. Now, when I tell people this, I could see it in their eyes, Marilla. How'd you do it? What's your secret? There's no damn secret, people. It's discipline.
That's
Stop.
right.
There's no secret. There's
That's
no
right.
losing weight is one of the hardest things you're going to do in your life, and you can't look at it as a finishing line. A big problem is that I lost the weight. I'm where I am now. I can go back to the way I was, and you've got to
Mm-mm.
make big changes.
Mhm.
Discipline is how I lost it. I wonder how discipline plays a role in your life, Marilla.
Mm. Discipline is everything. It really is. It's like you're saying, if you have a goal in mind, like we all want to get to the finish line. We want the thing at the end, but that needs to be sort of reverse engineered and go, okay, what is it that I need to commit to today? Like for you with your weight loss,
Mm.
we know that we know what to do when it comes to weight loss. Eat less, move more, and there's other things, of course, taking care of yourself in many ways.
But that's mostly it.
It's the follow through. It's the commitment. It's the daily commitment to the thing that you say that you want. So the question was, what do I
How does
discipline
it play?
myself? How does it play a role
How do,
in my life?
yeah.
My big obsession really is on emotions. It's internal. It's spiritual. It's my thought life. So discipline, when I hear the word discipline, how it plays a role in my mind, it literally is I have to discipline myself and the way I think about things. I have to discipline myself with my emotions. I have to not let the trash in my head, that natural trash
Mm,
talk, be the loudest voice
mm,
in my head. And so the discipline is choosing what thought am I going to have about the situation? How am I going to respond to a situation? Am I just going to be reactionary and let my emotions take control? Or am I going to discipline myself and saying, no, I'm going to govern myself differently? Because ultimately, what I want is really peace in my home, in my life, in my thought life. And in order to do that, I'm very aware. I'm very conscious about what I'm thinking about. And if it's not an empowering thought, worse, if it's hurting me, right? It could
mm,
just be a
negative.
neutral thought.
Mm.
Okay, but is it a thought that's debilitating me? Is it a thought that's keeping me small, that's making me shrink back? No, I gotta discipline myself into not giving into, that way of thinking. So that's what comes to mind with the word discipline.
How do you think your mother would answer that question?
How would discipline play
Play a role
a
in her
role in
life.
her life? Yeah, that's a really good question, and I'm stumped by that. These aren't conversations that we had. My mom had a 6th grade education on a ranch in Mexico, and so what's amazing about her is that she was childlike in some ways, right? She could read and write, 6th grade level. And so what I saw in her as she raised me really was she had a wisdom, she had a spiritual knowing. So she may not have gone to fancy schools, gotten any degrees, there's no letters behind her name, but she had just this wisdom about her, this depth about her, and this simplicity about her. And so I don't even know that she would understand this concept that it wouldn't have been a deliberate thought that
Right.
in terms of discipline. I don't know if that makes sense. So I don't know. I don't know how to answer that.
I mean, from what I've learned, I think of the words drive, focus, routine. These are just natural for her,
Yeah.
which can all be
Yes.
synonyms for discipline.
Yeah. You're right.
My father's an Italian immigrant. He was on a poor farm. He got his first pair of shoes when he was 12, similar education, came here when he was 20, and very similar
Mm.
in what he taught, what he expressed, what he understood. You don't take anything for granted. I remember
Mhm.
one time there was a penny I had in my pocket. I like threw it on the ground or something. He got so upset with, don't you ever throw away money. Don't you ever, and the lessons that you learn from your parents who had so much less than, it's just
Yeah.
hard to relate.
Yeah.
But it makes us better when you understand it and you appreciate.
Mhm. Yeah.
What motivates you, Morella Acebo?
Helping people motivates me. Seeing people who need encouragement motivates me. I'm naturally an encourager. I see the good in people and I want to help people.
I'm in the process of writing a book now. Actually, I haven't really talked about this, but I think that if it could help one person,
Mm.
it's done its job, right?
Mm. Up until recently, I would have said right to that. But somebody changed my mind
How
on
so?
that because I adopted that philosophy as well. I've heard it said so many times and
Yeah.
I believed it. I thought, yeah, you're right. All of this would be worth it if I could help one person. And I don't know who I was listening to. And the person said, well, if your book has the potential of helping one person, why not 100 people? Why not the dream be bigger? And so, not to quantify that it has to be exactly 100 people, but it opened up my perspective to say, to believe that my message, this book, is meant to help more than one person. The one person is a given.
Mm.
How many more people can it help? And that really, I, I sat up straighter. I'm like, yeah, it's helping me show up differently.
Mm. Interesting
Yeah,
perspective.
as I
So
talk about this book.
perhaps the one person is yourself, and now it's others to take in.
Mm, mm-hmm. Yeah. Another really encouraging thing I heard while I was in the process of writing this book is, we're aiming for the end goal of being an author, of having the book written. But
Mm.
really, it's more about the journey
Mm.
of who we're becoming in the process of writing that book. Because the writing is a discipline for sure. It's one of the hardest things
It
I've
is.
done. And to
Mm.
be able to look back and go, "Oh, I don't even know how I did it. I had so much
Mm.
going on." But it
Yeah.
goes back to what we were talking about is it takes discipline. It takes prioritizing it, saying this is important enough for me to put it at the top of my list. So life's going to look a little bit differently. I'm going to have to
Mm.
reprioritize and reorient things differently. But this book and my message has to go out. That's the
Mm.
urgency that I felt. And I gave myself a timeline for it. This was not going to take me 3 years. No offense if you're on a 3-year journey.
No,
Everybody's journey
no,
is different.
no,
Okay.
no.
I gave
Much
myself a short window because I wanted to up the ante and I wanted to show up in that way, imposing this deadline on myself. Nobody else was requiring me to do this, but I wanted to see, can I do this? Can I set myself up for this challenge? And what is that going to look like? What's it going to take? And I could see how that statement is true. That writing a book is not just about the end result, it's about who you become.
Mm.
Because I was living this book. It was on my mind. This was my baby. It's like I was birthing for 4 months, birthing this message. This was growing inside of me and it just had to get out. I had to push it out onto these pages. And so I wrote. I wrote and I wrote and I didn't judge my writing. I just wrote in a free state because I didn't want to interrupt the flow of thought, knowing I'm going to go back to this. I'm not going to nail it the first time around. This is for me to, let's just get this out a little bit. And I'll go back and rework it and pull out the gems. And hopefully there's enough gems in there to still make up a chapter and I can stitch those together and come out with the book that I wanted to have, that I wanted to put out there.
Birthed a book. I just wrote that and squared it. How do you maybe the name of this episode, I'm not quite sure. What how do you measure success, Marilla?
Again, because my topic is always emotions. I measure
Yes,
success
yes.
by the ability of removing myself from my own way.
Hmm.
Success is pushing through or doing the thing that I need that I know that needs to get done that I don't want to do. When I remove the excuses, work through the obstacles, I get to the other side, that's success.
Is it
Not
a
a
moving
traditional
target?
answer.
There's
It's
no wrong answer. There's
no,
no wrong answer. There's no wrong answer. Is the goal constantly
yeah,
shifting when after you push through?
it is. It is. I think success sometimes is really a day-to-day thing.
Mm,
Not all days are created equally. So I wake up on one day and, depending on my energy level or what I have going on, and, if by the end of the day I kind of reflect on the conversations I had, how I showed up for a meeting, or what I was able to get done that day, who was I being during the day? Was I being the person who I want to be? Was I, living with integrity? That's success.
mm,
Am I proud of the person that I showed up as today? Did I yell less at my kids? Was I kind to, the person next to me? Was I respectful to my husband? Those are things that we can measure at the end of the day, right? Like the degree, the job, the career, the big house, the car, those are way out in the future. I'm not saying, those aren't marks of success. It depends on how you define success. And on some level, those are things. Those are things that we would value and we would see as the symbols of success. But we can experience success on a day to day in our family life, in our relationships. And so if I end my day proud of who I was, yeah, when I did something I didn't want to do, maybe I washed the dishes, I just didn't feel like doing it. I just, but I did it because, well, they need to be done too. But did I do it with a
mm,
good attitude? Those kinds of things. Did I show patience today? Was I generous today?
mm,
Did I cut somebody off today? It could be endless, really. Those are little things that are
to
really big things because our life is made up of
yes.
so many little things. Yeah, and I want to consider myself successful every single day. Not 4 years from now, when I get the degree or whatever it is that I'm striving for, right? Who are we being in the process, right? So it's sort of like, again, going back to the book. The book was the end result, but who am I becoming in the process? So same with life. Same day to day. Who am I becoming?
It's amazing how uncomplicated and simple
Mhm.
those success markers are.
Yeah, they can be. Yeah, if we're intentional about thinking in those terms.
And you could breathe easier, you could set yourself easier, you can know that you're a good mother, a good father, a good
Right.
husband, a good wife, a good neighbor, a good friend, a good relative, uh, and you could move
Yeah.
on. I got so much inspiration from you, Morella, and I know we tried to schedule this a couple times. It got interrupted mostly by me, and I appreciate your patience and
Yes.
in doing this. And I so look forward to it, and I thank you so much for your time. It's been absolutely wonderful. Wonderful. How can people get in touch with you?
Mhm. My website is www.lifecoachmom.net. My email address, I'd love to hear from you. You can write me a message, shoot me an email. It's lifecoachingbymarella@yahoo.com. And I'm also loosely on Instagram. I'm gonna discipline myself, Joey,
Ha!
get back on there, be more consistent, and grow that content. The book has been written. I have so much content to share. Now it's about
Right.
putting it out there. Yeah.
Make sure to put that in the show notes. The link also in Amazon where you can get your book.
Yes.
We'll make sure to put that as well. And
Great.
I really, really appreciate your time. If I'm ever in your area, perhaps you, your husband, and I can go have a cup of coffee, and
I
I
would
can make
love
up
that.
for all this.
Yeah. Where do you live?
Appreciate it so much. I'm in the Northeast, but my daughter's in your area. She lives there
Okay.
still. Yeah, yeah. I'm in the
Okay.
Northeast. Yeah, yeah. But I
Yeah.
do travel a lot. So I appreciate your time, Marilla. You be well.
You too. Thank you so much, Joey. This was fun. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pinn's Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pinn's Disciplined Conversation.